The college football playoffs,
CFP.
they finally happened. We've been waiting all year, and we saw the
wow.
first round of games. What'd you do?
Nice.
Spit
Yeah.
everywhere.
Stuff put
Classic
just
Mike.
Yeah,
like,
well, he got real excited. We were in Texas last weekend for the games, and we were kind of isolated in Austin doing our own thing, and we didn't realize the explosion that happened in sports commentary.
Yeah.
Oh,
the
yeah.
weekend.
No, there's a lot
Kirk
of drama.
Herbstreit kind of started the most,
Open the floodgates a
yeah.
little bit with
insane head-to-head between every sports commentator of all time. So we figured, we got 1.6K subscribers now. Might as well join in on the topic.
Yeah.
Sounds like also Kirk might have listened to a couple of things some people on this podcast have been saying about certain teams. We'll get into that. Anyways, he said being 11-1 shouldn't have mattered to make the college football playoffs. He said after watching it was after the Friday night game, then he did it again on Saturday night, that they need to put the best 12 teams in. Wins should not matter. Losses should not matter as far from a number of wins, number of losses. It should only be about what good teams you beat and what good teams
should
you lost
only
to.
be the SEC.
Oh, yeah, that's
a sprinkle of the Big Ten.
That's essentially what he was getting at. And then he went off and talked about the radical fringe of Ohio State fans that were calling for Ryan Day to be fired. He then threw First Take in there and said, I wonder what they'll say now after this. So I want to open it up and say, did the committee get the wrong teams in? Do you agree with Kirk? And also, if you want to address the Ohio State thing at all, I have quite a bit to say about this, but I'll let you go first. How did you feel about what he said? I felt like this was a little crazy to go at Indiana like this.
Yeah, it was kind of.
Oh no, that was messed up. It's like
A lot of shots.
I'll never get this because all these teams that were on the fringe, all they had to do was win in these mediocre games they played, and it was their fault they lost. Indiana had the same 7-point, 8-point favorite games, 13-point favorites, and they won their games. It didn't matter who they were at the time. Nobody was arguing it, but of course now that it matters because Indiana lost to Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah, the Sunday morning quarterback or whatever, the Monday morning quarterback is crazy with these games.
It's crazy. No, Alabama was 13-point favorites against Oklahoma or something crazy like that. And all of a sudden, because 3 weeks later, now that the playoffs matter, that was a big game, that an SEC type schedule game, and maybe you should switch it around. No, it's terrible takes. It's all just after. They're trying to fix it for next year. It's so stupid. Yeah. They got the right 12 teams in. If you want to be part of those 12 teams, don't lose when it matters in the regular season. Don't lose the games that you're supposed to win. It's pretty simple. They would never get mad at you if you lost a Georgia game, LSU game, but all these games. Don't lose the games you're supposed to win. Simple as that. I think they got it right, and these guys he's just wrong. Dead wrong on this.
Yeah.
Mario?
No, I mean exactly the same. I'm just gonna echo what Ryan said. Because at that point, what's your metric for being allowed in?
Why do you play the regular season?
Exactly.
I saw a take that essentially broke down what he said as far as how this would work on an actual playoff choosing standpoint. It'd be very similar to the old BCS rankings, but essentially what he was saying is put the best 12 rosters in.
Yeah.
So use some sort of preseason roster analytic to identify which are the best 12 teams and then match them up to try to create the most entertaining games, which is, in my opinion, the most retarded. That's not what that's not what playoffs are about.
No.
They expanded for a reason. That's not it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's also the whole reason of having different conferences is there's a certain level of exclusivity and it benefits people in the amount of travel that they have to do, the amount of money and the networking money that they get.
And they
from
play
it.
different styles of ball, and it's cool to see them play against each other.
For sure. It makes it way more fun, way more dynamic across the country because of it. But it's also this whole conversation came up because of the scores of the games. They weren't really close.
It happened Friday night, really, is what kicked it off after Notre Dame was up 27-3 against Indiana. And we know Indiana scored with 1:27 left and onside kicked and scored with 20 seconds left. But it was that whole entire game, pretty much 90% of the game was outside of 25 points. Yeah. 20 points.
Here's how I think of that, though, is, I think we can all kind of agree that Notre Dame was going to be just ranked going into that game as a higher seed going into it. And so, if they were playing in a neutral site, you still assume that the higher seed is going to win. And now for the first time ever, you bring in home field advantages.
That's what I was going to talk about.
And you now get the added sway of the crowd, which isn't a 50-50 split. It's now going to be a 95-5 split, right, in the crowd. So, I mean, that's massive for everything. It wasn't my first college game I've ever attended, but it was my first Texas game at DKR. Very hyper aware of
95% Texas.
Yeah.
At least.
And I know, and I now understand what it's like to be so freaking loud and rocking when the other team has the ball that they can't hear themselves think.
You can't hear yourself yelling.
And then you shut the hell
silent.
up, and it's dead silent when your team has the ball so
Yeah.
they can focus and do their thing. It's an unbelievable amount of momentum that will shift and sway.
For sure.
I think this whole argument is kind of ridiculous because it's just not taking into account, the dynamics of different football that's playing the different conferences and the home field advantage that we knew was going to be a thing. We knew it.
I don't want to repeat too much of what we said, but basically everything I have prepared is kind of on par with what we all agree. It sounds like no one really agrees with Kirk here, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. I've never stood up for Indiana all season long. I always thought they weren't a good team.
Yeah.
But I will never say an 11-1 team in what now seems to be what Ryan said all year, the best conference in college football, right? They have 3 of the 8 teams remaining.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna expand the playoffs to give more teams an opportunity, and at the same time, you're going to make these conferences go from 10, 12, even 14 teams to 16 to 18 team conferences.
You're going to have a lot of teams.
It means you're going to have teams that don't play. Like back in the day, you'd usually play at over half the schedule of the conference in a season, like 75%. Now you'll play like half, if even half, of your entire schedule. You have 18 teams. You're only going to play 8 of those teams in a conference schedule.
Yeah.
There's 9 teams you're not playing, for the entire season. So there's going to be a situation where there's an 11-1 team in the best conference in football, and I don't know any sort of 12, 14 team playoff that would ever exclude that team.
Yeah.
So that conversation seemed absurd to me, to say, oh, you got to look at these 9-3 SEC teams and somehow objectively pick which one to put over the 11-1 Big Ten team. Like, just shut up. That's so stupid. You're not being objective. But a lot of people complained also about the nature of the games, like the blowouts, and I kind of wanted to talk about that for a second, hear what you guys thought, because people were really upset that these weren't competitive games. Pretty much none of them. I mean, the Clemson game was the most competitive. It was the only game that was one score at any point in the fourth quarter for any of these games. And I know we'll cover that, in a different episode later on. But, there's never been 12 teams that realistically can win a college football national championship.
Yeah.
It's never happened.
Never
year, and I've been saying this since the beginning when we first had the college football 12-team playoff. I don't think the goal is to get here's the 12 teams that can realistically win. So you got to analyze really hard the teams between 10 and 15. There's always like 2, 3, maybe 4 teams. And the whole conversation around the 4-team playoff, right, is like there's a decent chance one of those 3 or 4 teams that can actually win probably gets left out. The easiest example is Georgia last year, right? I mean, we talked about this a billion times.
Yeah.
Where
they were all favored.
They only lost 1 game. It was by 3 points in the SEC championship, and Vegas had them as a favorite against every team. That's a realistic argument as to, okay, you might be leaving the best team in college football out, and it's like, well, were they deserving? It's like, well, they won, 12 games in the regular season. So, that I don't think you need to really analyze these that hard. I think you should just let in the teams that deserve it. And then when you're talking about blowouts, 12 of the 20 semifinal games in college football playoff history were outside of 17 points.
Wait, 12 of the
12 of the 20 semifinal games that have ever been played. So in the Final Four, the first round of the college football playoffs last tenure,
the first
17
first
points
round
or more. 60% of all of the first round games in college football playoffs so far, and that's first round meaning Final Four. So that's 2 rounds from where we're at now. 16 of the 30 all time have been outside 3 scores or more. So blowouts are not exclusive to college football. Also, the first round in any sport is usually blowouts. Look at NFL first round last year. 5 of the 6 games were, I believe, outside.
Like 2 scores.
No, they were outside of 14 points for 5 of the 6 games in the first round of the NFL playoffs. Average margin of victory 17.5. Home teams with 5-1. So saying in college football where the home field advantage is greater, that the home team that's a higher seed and a double-digit favorite all won their games by double digits, and being upset about that.
Be surprised. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys just blatantly agree with that.
No,
but I thought
100%.
the outrage was the most insane thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
People just need something to complain about.
I think a lot of people are just starting to watch college football, so they
That
have
might
no
be it, too.
backing. It's like the last couple of years, it's really gotten hot. The NIL, getting other people involved. But
12-team playoffs, and now your team all of a sudden might be relevant where it wasn't before.
the Colorados, Arizona States, Boise's.
Arizona States, exactly.
But that's a stupid argument.
Yeah, backtracking a little bit as to what you said, and I think what you opened up with is like, it almost seems like a tease to have a 12-team playoff because you have other teams like South Carolina, Alabama, who are seems like the fan base is making the most outrage right now. Theoretically, from my
Ole Miss.
perspective.
Yeah, the SEC as a whole was freaking out
Every
until
SEC
Saturday
team.
night. They got really quiet for some strange reason. I'm not completely
I don't know
sure.
what happened. Something happened Saturday
something
night.
happened.
It was a
But-
belt to ass. I
It was a
heard.
10
It was
10-win
that was a
SEC
belt
team,
to ass
yeah.
game, I will say. But regardless, I really like what you said because you're absolutely right. Is if you want to be in, win the games that you're supposed to
Yeah,
win.
it's really simple.
I mean,
It's not hard.
that's not.
Don't make
that's
it
just
harder than it has to be.
If you're Ole Miss and you're losing to Vanderbilt, I think at home.
it was
Arkansas, and then if you're Alabama
Kentucky.
losing to
Kentucky.
Vanderbilt,
Alabama lost to Vandy and
Alabama,
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, you know,
Oklahoma.
it's like, yeah, just win those games. Don't let there be an argument or anything like that, and then you're in
Yeah, Ole
and you
Miss
get
lost
to
to
just
Kentucky
talk about
and
later.
Florida. Like people
Kentucky,
forget, it was like
Florida.
2 weeks left in the season. If Ole Miss and Bama just don't lose
Either one of them just
with
does their
2
job.
weeks left
They're
in the
in,
season,
100%.
two unranked teams,
Yep.
they can be in. Fine.
Yep.
SMU doesn't get in. Maybe they even get in over Indiana,
Sure.
actually,
I
which
don't-
would be
I don't
nuts.
mind
But
it.
like, if you're 9-3 and you're losing to unranked teams, shut the fuck up.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. Go home.
Yep.
You didn't make the playoffs. Have fun in your bowl game.
Argue with the
Yep.
wall.
Bama plays a real tough 7-win Michigan team.
Oh,
I hear they're upsetting big name programs.
I
this
might
year.
actually root for Michigan just for the idea of just
Wow.
the SEC getting shit on.
Yeah.
All that talk about they make the playoffs, 17 Michigan beats Alabama.
Yeah, well, in
That'd be
our-
electric.
That'd be crazy.
In the next video, we're going to talk about kind of all the games specifically as to what happened, not just the reaction to them. So if you're interested, tune in, stay tuned, stay locked in with us. We're basically covering college football
Lock
exclusively for the next month.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
A million videos a week. So
it's the best.
We
drop
never
a
leave this
subscribe.
table.
Yeah,
It's
drop
literally
a
just-
subscribe.
yeah,
we live,
yeah.
follow. We
We
live
sleep-
at this
yeah,
table.
we sleep here,
Let us
eat
know what
here.
you think in the comments. Do you agree that it's kind of crazy to
Absurd.
even consider Indiana being out? Or are you on the Kirk Herbstreit side of the world where it's like, hey, SEC no matter what? Let us know.
I mean,
SEC.
SEC, hook 'em horns.